Hello everyone. Let us today delight into this shade of nature. What we see in this picture is a wind torn tree, blown and tossed with its leaves falling apart. Also, beneath, you can see the water body, also tormented and assuming colors that are being sent to it. And of course, the sky also reflecting the commotion on the earth, loosely scattered clouds, all as if being taken away, being swept away by a great force of nature, the west wind. West wind is a wind that blows from the west to the east. And this is our concept for today's understanding. In the initiative of the Commissionerate of College Education, Government of Rajasthan, and which is popularly known as Gyandut 2.0. This is a platform that has been devised so as to bring home learning not only to the ones who are registered regularly with the government institutions and the private institutions, for all those who might benefit. And this is our topic for today, Ode to the West Wind, written by Percy Byssche Shelley, a great romantic poet, famed for his philosophy of life. He speaks about nature because romantic cult is all about nature. So he has a voice indiscriminately talking about some pessimistic aspect, but then immediately he turns over for a better, and that better is an optimism, a prophetic dream of goodness to ultimately prevail. आज हम पढ़ने वाले हैं ओड टू द वेस्ट विंड, जिसे लिखा है छायावादी कवि पर्सी बिश शैली ने। वे छायावादी हैं क्योंकि वो प्रकृति की बात करते हैं, प्रकृति जो हमेशा बहुत कल्याणकारी न होकर कभी कभी विनाशकारी भी है, किंतु प्रकृति के हर विनाश में छिपा हुआ एक संदेश विकास का, समृद्धि का, नए जीवन का। And I am Dr. Manju Sharma, making my own estimation of this poem. So, let us read the poem. But before we can read the poem, I would like you and request you to kindly look into the specifications of the word ode. The poem is titled Ode to the West Wind. West wind, we know, is the wind that blows from the west onto the east, bringing with itself a cover of deaths. But then, what is an ode? Before we understand the poem, I think it very right that we also try to make an estimate of what an ode is. However, I am very sure you must have been introduced to this term sometime or the other, but believing it to be of some importance even to the first year students, I hereby tell you What is an ode? The first quality of an ode is it is in the form of an address. Address means spoken to someone. But this address is often to some abstraction. Abstraction means not a human being, other than a human being. So the poet tends to speak to someone other than human. Let me tell you that when we talk to someone who cannot reply back, people might think us mad. But it is our subjective choice. ये मेरी व्यक्तिगत रुचि है कि मैं किससे बात करना चाहती हूँ. So the poet chooses to speak to someone who is not a human. So it is not written about, but the poem ode is written to someone, and that is formative. That is fundamental quality of the ode. Second, an ode has lyric enthusiasm and emotional intensity. I have already told you that this is a subjective composition, a derivative from a lyric. It is a spontaneous overflow of the poet's emotion. So an ode is not an intellectual poem, unlike the metaphysical poems. It is in fact an emotional composition. The poet is charged with an emotion when he talks to something. And when he talks to something or someone who is not a human, actually he is charged with emotion. The third quality of an ode is its theme is dignified and exalted. It has high seriousness. Now, let us take the example of Ode to the West Wind. In this poem, Percy Byssche Shelley is talking to the west wind. What he will talk to the west wind that has got no capacity to answer back the poet? Definitely, he must be aiming at a high seriousness. उनके मन में कुछ एक गंभीर बात होगी, वह बात जो, और वो कौन सी बात होगी जिसको हम हाईली सीरियस बोलेंगे, क्योंकि कवि उस चीज में वह गुण देखता है जो मनुष्यों में लगभग विलुप्त प्राय हो चुके हैं. Those qualities which are not generally found among human beings. So, when he sees this quality, any one quality among in the addressed subject, definitely his language will become dignified and exalted. The fourth characteristic is its style is also elevated. The style resonates with the subject of address, of appreciation of the quality in a very highly serious note. It is also sufficiently long to allow for the full development of the dignified theme. So, it is a comparatively long poem. The fifth characteristic is that the development of thought is logical and clear. So when you will read Ode to the West Wind, you will see there is a logic, a scientific logic behind this celebration of the power of the west wind, and which will be explained with a thorough clarity. And one more characteristic is that its metrical pattern may be regular or irregular. So the rhyme scheme that he will employ could be a regular scheme or an irregular one, but it is always elaborate and often complex and intricate. So, to tell you the characteristics of ode in a nutshell, I would touch upon just one word from each of these 6 points, that this poem is an address of an emotional intensity dealt with in high seriousness, in an elevated style, logically and clearly, and in a complex and intricate manner. These have been defined as characteristic qualities of odes. Let us see how much of these have been exercised. But before I move further in the poem, I would also like to tell you that odes originated, as many other genres, in Greece. And Pindar is the father, the Greek father of odes. But a Latin writer, a Roman writer by the name Horace employed it also. So, the simpler forms of odes employed by Horace are the Horatian poems, odes, and this Ode to the West Wind is a Horatian ode. And now we begin the poem. If you remember, I told you that the first quality of the ode is that it is an address. And the first expression of this poem is address, because west wind is an inanimate power. It is not a human being. Still, the poet chooses to write the name of the west wind with big, bold letters. And he makes an address with the word O. वे कह रहे हैं, उसको संकेत करके, उसको इंगित करके, वेस्ट विंड को इंगित करके बोल रहे हैं, ओ वाइल्ड वेस्ट विंड. सी the beauty of the alliterative device, the WWW, repeated with the effect of focusing our interest and our attention upon the west wind as a power. West wind is personified. And what is the quality that west wind has? It is wild. Remember this. What is wild? Wild is something that is uncontrollable, that has got a nature of its own and will abide by its own nature. जिसका अपना एक गुण है, स्वतंत्र है, निरंकुश है. तो ये निरंकुश वेस्ट विंड उससे बात करते हुए बोलते हैं, Thou breath of autumn's being, you are the breath of autumn's being. Being is personality. You are the breath of the season of autumn. And what is the season of autumn? Autumn is the season when the leaves fall down. That is the last season of the year. The season which brings the death of the year. So west wind is like, अब देखिए आप कितना सुंदर विवरण है कि वेस्ट विंड एक शक्ति है जो सांस ले रही है, और उसी के कारण से ऑटम आया है. इतनी तीव्र, इतना वाइल्ड है वो, इतनी जोर जोर से सांसें ले रही है कि ऑटम से में सब पत्तियां गिर गई हैं. Thou, from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. So he says, your presence, wild west wind, it is unseen presence, but it is experienced, it is carried, it is shown by the leaves, by the dead leaves. They are driven like ghosts. See the simile employed here. The dead leaves are compared to ghosts. So what are ghosts? The transition of human beings into non-human. So when they have passed away, when humans passed away untimely, they are thought to get transformed into ghosts. He says, leaves are flying away from you like ghosts. Ghosts fly from whom? From the enchanter. Enchanter is a man who can exercise magic and can control ghosts. The 3 lines are about the beginning of the poem, in which wild west wind is exercising its powers on the leaves, dead leaves. We continue. Dead leaves, which are yellow and black and pale and hectic red. Pestilence-stricken multitudes. Pestilence, sickness. Stricken, hurt by. Multitudes, so multitudes are millions. Millions of leaves which are yellow and black and yellow, pale, dull yellow and red. They are like a sickness-stricken multitudes. O thou. Now, O thou is again for the west wind. He says, you chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds. So, wild west wind, you do not only carry away the leaves, but you also carry in your chariot. Now, the west wind is shown to be like a king, a monarch, the most powerful. When it comes in its chariot, it carries the seeds, the winged seeds, to their dark wintry bed, where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave. So the seeds will lie on the earth like a corpse inside a grave. We see in the opening stanza only death is being talked about. Death in the image of ghosts, death in the image of corpse, death in the image of grave. So not only the leaves but also the seeds will be buried in the earth until thine azure sister of the spring. Until what time will they lie there? Until your azure is blue, until your blue sister of the spring, until spring comes. So see, the 2 seasons have been talked about. Autumn, the season of death, and spring, the season of birth. So even when the leaves and the seeds are being carried to be buried under earth, with a hope that the spring shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth. Clarion is a musical instrument. So when spring will come, a beautiful melody will be created on earth. The dreaming earth will wake and fill with living hues and odors plain and hill. Whenever in a poem, if there is something given in parenthesis means brackets, you have to read it later. So we will continue, we will read it like this, and fill with living colors and fragrances. You will fill plain and hill. Who will do this? Spring will do this. What is west wind doing? West wind is carrying away the leaves and the seeds. Leaves fly like the ghosts, and the seeds go and get buried like corpses under the earth until spring will come, driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air. I would also request you to kindly imagine this sensuousness, this image making power. आप कल्पना करें कि एक तरफ में सारी पत्तियां भूतों की तरह भाग रही हैं और छिप जा रही हैं वेस्ट विंड के डर के कारण, और बहुत सारे सीड्स उड़ाए लिए जा रहे हैं ये हवा, और उनको भी दबा देगी मुर्दों की तरह से ज़मीन में। लेकिन एक दिन जरूर आएगा, द डे ऑफ द स्प्रिंग, जब ये सोती हुई, ये सपना देखती हुई ज़मीन एक बार जग जाएगी और पूरी ज़मीन पर ह्यूज़ आर कलर्स, ओडर्स आर फ्रेग्रेंसेस, सो सब जगह रंग और खुशबू फैल जाएगी। आप देख रहे हैं इस स्टैंजा में भी डेथ के साथ साथ ही पोएट लाइफ की भी बातें कर रहे हैं। वाइल्ड स्पिरिट, अगेन ही मेक्स एन एड्रेस टू द wind and says, wild spirit, you are moving everywhere. You are destroyer and preserver. So what are the two qualities of the west wind? That when it is a destroyer, in fact it is a preserver. इसने preserve कर दिया leaves को, क्योंकि leaves ही खाद बनाएंगी। किसके लिए? उन सीड्स के लिए जो अभी ज़मीन के गड्ढों में दब जा रहे हैं। तो ये वेस्ट विंड हैज़ गॉट द मैजेस्टिक पावर टू बीइंग अ डिस्ट्रॉयर as well as a preserver. Semicolon, and then the poet exclaims, exclamation mark दिया हुआ है, he says, hear, oh hear, means listen to me, oh powerful thing. So in the first stanza, we have all the qualities of the ode expressed. The poem is an address to the west wind, which has got the quality which is not found among human beings. Human beings can either be destroyers or be preservers. But west wind has the power to be a destroyer and preserver, and to which the poet makes an earnest request to please listen to him. So this stanza, the first stanza that we have read today, is about the impact of the west wind on the earth. The earth that is experiencing autumnal death, in the way that the leaves have dropped down, that the seeds have dropped down, and the leaves and the seeds will be buried. One for the day that spring will come, the blue sister of autumn. When spring will come, these leaves and these seeds will regenerate, and then the whole earth will be filled with colors and fragrances. The plains and the hills will all be covered. So, I would just like to recapitulate what I have taught you until now. A quick recapitulation that an ode is an address to something that is non-human, and the poet chooses to talk to that power because he feels that this has a quality which is not normally possessed by human beings. And here, Shelley is celebrating the destructive and the preserving power of the west wind. He appreciates, and then by the end of the stanza, he makes a small pleading to please listen to him. Because things which are powerful, they don't listen to the ones who are weak and standing somewhere patiently to be listened or to be taken into account. कवि की अपनी क्षमताएं लगभग समाप्त हैं. वो इस शक्ति को एड्रेस करके बोल रहे हैं, मेरी एक बार बात सुन लो. तुम्हारे पास शक्ति है, तुमने पूरी पृथ्वी को आलोड़ित कर दिया है. You have changed the whole earth. Leaves have blown away from you. Seeds have blown away for you. And I can see that from this destruction will arise a birth, because while you destroy, you are actually preserving them. This is all for today. Thank you. We shall continue further in my second and maybe a third session of the explanation of this poem. Thank you.